Hello again, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. Please join me in welcoming Zoe Aiano, co-director of the film you've just seen, Flotacija, to Aberystwyth. As ever with these things, I'm going to kick off this Q&A with a few questions of my own. But hopefully you've got some questions brewing out there in the audience as well, and you will have an opportunity. I will turn to you in due course. So I wanted to start, I suppose it's the obvious, maybe not, but presumably obvious question to start with, which is just, how did this come about? How did you get to Serbia? First of all, how did you reach this project, or how did it reach you?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us. It's really exciting to have our UK premiere here, and I'm very happy to be a part of a festival that seems to have some morals and is also doing a lot to support Palestine. It's very rare at the moment, so I just wanted to say thank you very much for that. How I came to Serbia, actually I came to Serbia because of this film. I'd never even been there before we started shooting. I'd been in Croatia. It's a very long story, but I was in Croatia and I met Alessandra, my co-director, at a festival, and we were both kind of between projects, and she pretty much proposed that we go to Eastern Serbia because she said it's a super interesting region, very overlooked. Nobody really cares about it. The only time it's ever shown is in this very stigmatizing way. And she's like, I've always wanted to go there and do some proper research about it. Why don't we go? And I was like, sure, of course, I'm not going to say no. So that's how we ended up there. And this region is, aside from mining, this region is very famous for magic and witchcraft. Like most people in the Balkans who know about Eastern Serbia know it in terms of the witches. So that was our first idea, that we would make some short, cute, interesting feminist project about witches. And then we arrived, and on day one we met Dragan, and he was telling us all of these crazy stories about dragon hunting, and we're like, okay, well, I guess we're making a film about dragon hunters now. It didn't seem like we had very much choice, and and then it kind of became much more drawn out than any of us expected. We were filming 8 years all in, and it just sort of kept getting bigger and bigger, and the scope kept getting wider and wider.
That's amazing. One of my questions was going to be, just how long were you there? I suppose, how did you... you say you met Dragan, and I guess that maybe was almost immediate, but I was going to ask, how did you focus in the film onto the siblings and this particular family and everything that's going on, whilst sort of giving us this portrait of a town and a region? Did that take a little while as part of the process, or was it a at first sight kind of change of plan from what you were originally looking at?
Yeah, I think for a while at the beginning we were really imagining it as more of a portrait of this whole area, and Dragan was just going to be kind of one character, and then we sort of focused it in that it would be on the 3 male generations, and kind of how each one represents sort of, a shift in the relationship to nature and the relationship to mining and to magic. And then we met Desa, and that all went out the window, basically. It's a combination of two things. Firstly, that we realised that we couldn't just talk about these things in isolation, that we had to include the social political construct. Otherwise, it was just a cute story about some people with an interesting tradition. And then, the other thing is, with Dessa it was love at first sight, because she had been living away for the first year that we were filming, and we're actually staying in her house. And then she turned up in year 2, and the rest was history, basically.
That's brilliant. I'm glad. I'm very glad about that. You mentioned that this was a collaboration with your co-director, Alessandra. I just wondered, what is, you'd worked together previously? No. Okay. So what was that? How does that work? How do you go about working collaboratively? How often do you fall out? How often do you disagree?
I always feel awkward answering this question when she's not here to defend herself. No, I mean, it shifted a lot. Like, she was really, in the beginning, the instigator. It was kind of her baby at first, and actually I was earning my living as an editor, and I kind of assumed I was the editor on the project. But then I guess I can't keep my nose out, so I came and then I started interfering. And she, several years into it, like 3 years into it, she had a baby, and so she pretty much dropped out of coming on shoots. So for the final years, then I kind of took over. So we kind of figured it out somehow.
Amazing. So it's like a practical collaboration in all sorts of ways. That's brilliant. One of my favourite scenes in the film is when Dessa is explaining the medicinal wood, right? How can it not be a favourite scene in the film? It's brilliant. They're arguing. And there's a similar scene with the ice cream and the TV show and stuff later. There's something, throughout the film, there's these really intimate and domestic scenes. And I'm just wondering, I suppose you've partially answered in that you were there for 8 years, but I'm just wondering how you go about sort of building a relationship that grants you that sort of trust and that sort of access to such domestic spaces, I suppose. Is it even it's something that can be intentional, or is it something that sort of naturally happens, I suppose, as you're there?
It's on them and just being super open and welcoming. I think also at the time, like when we first began especially, Alessandra, my co-director, is like 8 years younger than I am, and when we started, she was in her early 20s, and I think they looked at us a little bit like these little girls. We're going to take care of them, and but it's partly Balkan hospitality. People are just very welcoming and very open, and we bonded with them. Well, at least Alessandra did. I had to learn Serbian first, but we bonded with them very quickly, and it was just kind of automatic. And in a way, I think we envisaged a different style of filmmaking, but this was kind of what felt natural. This was what came naturally, and then we realised we should just go with it eventually.
Brilliant. You mentioned that you first envisioned yourself as the editor for the project, and I wanted to actually ask about that because I think I'm so curious as to how when you make a film that's sort of got this very deliberate pace and very sort of, the use of just static shots and sort of scenes of these, mundane's not the word, but the daily things that are going on. Just wondering how you go about, because presumably you must have a lot of footage to work with in the first place, how you go about, figuring out which of those beautiful daily moments you do actually include in the final cut and what that process is like.
Horrendous. And never ending. And every time I watch it now I'm like, I wish and also I'm like, we should have swapped this scene for this scene, and I really miss this, and it's hard. It was really difficult, and that was the structuring of the film was just an absolute nightmare, and you're trying to balance all the different elements, and especially the fact that there's so many scenes when they're just talking, and we really needed to balance that out as well. It's just the way editing works, unfortunately. There's and it was very mysterious after we had the premiere in Belgrade. Dessa came up to me and she's like, I know you didn't use the best footage. She said, she's like, so we're making part 2, right? And I was like, okay. I have absolutely no idea what she's referring to, and I'm like, what's the best? What did I miss?
I was about to ask, has she told you what she was referring to specifically? But
no, sadly, the great tragedy of the film is she died shortly after that. She contracted cancer just before the premiere, so we finished in the nick of time in that sense. So it remains a great mystery, and she's I don't know, it's really funny. She's left. She's sort of cast a spell on all of us. She's left like mysterious messages from beyond the grave for everyone. Like everybody had, like she left all these kind of diaries and missives and almost like Dessa's law that like rules to be followed. And so even after death, she's like looming large over everybody and controlling what everybody does.
That's kind of beautiful though. What a legacy. I love that. Okay, I'm going to turn to the audience and see if there's any questions. We do have a roaming mic, courtesy of Gaz over there. And this is always a little bit awkward where I stare intently and see if any hands go up. Gaz hovers above.
Oh,
There we go. Oh, let's let Gaz.
You would be far away.
Slightly. Oops. Is it on?
Oh, press that at the top.
Slightly.
I'll come round.
Come on,
Slightly
Gaz.
vested interest, but I think one of the things I wanted to ask you was the scenes about the mining, which I found spectacular, being able to get into that environment. Was that kind of quite a difficult thing to film, consistently going back to that mining area and seeing that kind of overarching, huge, sort of monolithic kind of industry going on? Because it has a real impact on the film. Was that difficult to film?
You mean practically or sort of emotionally? I mean, I was never happier than when we were filming The Mine. I could have filmed it and filmed it and filmed it. They pretty much had to drag me away. So one thing that shifted over time is when we first arrived, there was a different mayor in charge of the city, and he thought that we were going to bring tourism to Mainepec. He was like, oh yeah, make this film and turn it into a tourist hotspot for the region. I mean, it is a really beautiful area. And so he granted us access everywhere, and he let us in the mine. Nobody really thought much about it. We kind of could go anywhere, do anything, and then the Chinese came and it was like lockdown, nothing. And yeah, then a new mayor took control, and he was very, very suspicious of us, and he really didn't want us doing anything. So it changed a lot over time in terms of our access. But we did manage to, we got as far as talking to some of the Chinese bosses of them, or like sort of the sub-bosses, who were kind of just geeky guys in their 30s, and they were like, everybody's scared of us, but we're just nice guys, and we're just trying to do our jobs. And they tried to get us access to the mine, but failed. But they did tell us, so a lot of the later stuff is shot from I call it the exploded road. So it used to be, there was a fairly major road going up through the town and round, but because of a mining incident, they accidentally blew it up. And now there's this gaping big hole, and like the railings are sort of crumbling. So they just sort of half-assedly blocked up the road, and now it's where teenagers go to neck and people walk their dog. And I'm there filming usually. And so they told us about that. We didn't actually know that existed, and they said, we can't let you anywhere in the mine, but we will turn a blind eye if you film from outside in. So that's kind of what we did in the end. But I mean, every time I watch it, when I first started going to Mainepec, I was so in love with this huge turquoise lake, and watching it disappear was just heartbreaking. There's nothing now. It's just a giant crevasse, and that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question they'd like to ask? There's one here.
Well, it was fabulous. It was really intriguing. Can you hear me? I can talk about that. It wasn't clear to me, Flotacija, was that big building with all sorts of weird things going on?
Yes.
And what was its function, really? They were
So-
saying about crushing things, but...
Well, the kind of the point of it is that nobody really knows. For me, my pretentious answer to why the film is called Flotacija is that it's somehow where the industrial and the mystical meet, because it sort of exists only in the imagination, really, in a sense. Everybody's fascinated by it, but nobody really actually understands it. And so it's this huge building with the like weird lava pits. That's what Flotacija is, and it's the process of separating out the minerals from the ore. That's what happens, and it's kind of the most prestigious, I don't know if you can say that about a mining process, but it's like the most important, let's say, step in the mining process for copper, but it's also the most deadly, so it's very noxious, it's very, it causes a lot of illnesses. So it's kind of, people want to work there because there's prestige, but obviously it's also killing them.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Those things, right?
Thanks. Hi. Could you say more about the Chinese involvement, and is this widespread throughout the Balkans?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's a big issue, so I don't know how much everybody knows about Balkan or Serbian geopolitics, but Serbia has kind of made a name for itself in recent years as sort of playing all sides. It's between Russia and the EU and China, and it tries to curry favour with all of them at different times and get what it can. It flirts with them all, basically, but promises nothing. And so, yeah, China has become a bigger and bigger investor in Serbia, especially in recent years. And I mean, comparatively, it's a bit complicated in our case because, in a sense, when it was under state rule, they didn't ever invest in it particularly. They just kept it kind of running on a bare bones operation, and it was kind of almost more of a political move to keep it open so that they could say they were keeping it open. But then the Chinese are really going for it, and they're really going for gold, as it were. And so they've really stepped up everything and intensified everything. So pay is better, there's more work, which is making people happy in one sense, but also pollution massively increased because the work has intensified so much. And I mean, probably the town will be blown up at some point because the greatest deposit is underneath the town itself. So it's very likely that the town will end up being destroyed in the next couple of years. And basically their plan is to get in, take everything out as fast as they can, and get out again. And I mean, the town will be a shell by the time they finish. There'll be nothing left, and then this is the only means of employment. So, yeah, it will be if it still stands, it will be a bit of a disaster. But there's also lots of stories and rumours, and it's hard for me to pick out what's kind of gossip and what's true. But they have the concession for copper at the moment, and they also have the concession for gold, but that's starting later. But supposedly they've already been taking the gold out like in rock form, and they're taking it out like before they've properly extracted it. So yeah, there's lots of rumours. And in one of the mines, I'm not sure about Meidepek, but definitely in one of the other mines very close by, which they also took over, they've been using Chinese prisoners as forced labour in those mines as well. So yeah, it's a bit of a disaster in every sense.
Yeah, we've loved it. I wanted to ask you the really boring question about funding. When, how, when did you pitch it, all the stuff? I mean, I was presuming, was it in a lot of development hell, or?
It was long. I mean, well, first of all, when we started, we had no idea what we were doing, so we had to learn along the way. We pitched it everywhere we possibly could. It was difficult. I wasn't able to get funding from the UK, and it took us a long time to convince Serbia, but we did eventually. So yeah, we kind of lived. We at the beginning. We also made several short films along the way, and that kind of is how we managed to. So the very first trips we just funded ourselves, and then we started to try and get funding for short films, and we in the same area, and we would film for this film as we were filming for those films, and then we started to win like 500 euros here on pitches, and then that would buy us another trip. And then eventually we got development funding from SCAM in France, and that we got 6,000 from them or something. And that 6,000, we lived off it. We got every penny we possibly could out of that 6,000. And then then we finally got production funding from Serbia. Finally, yeah, no, I think it was about 5 or 6 years before we got proper funding, yeah. And then it was really bad because we could finally afford a professional crew, and we had to tell them to make it look worse so it would match with the older stuff.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I also really enjoyed it. I just wondered whether there's any sense that the traditions that they have basically are being passed on to the next generation. It's the sense I got was that the dragon basically stood in for some sort of connection to the natural world, which is vanishing pretty rapidly in all areas of the planet. I just wondered whether there was any hint that was going to be continued, or whether it really was going to just sort of drop away with that older generation as they pass on.
I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of cautiously optimistic in a weird way. I mean, it's Svele, Dragon's son, like the bald guy. He's fascinating because he didn't really want to be filmed in any of the magical stuff. Because he takes it really seriously, and actually he thought that we were kind of angering the spirits by filming, and he didn't want to do any magic related stuff because of that. So the belief is still pretty strong, but yeah, the question of what will be left of the forests, I don't know. I feel like there is still. For me, this film is kind of about them just being desperate to, like, this is their home and they want to keep it their home. And with, like, the younger generation, that's still true. Like, Svele, we didn't film it, but he went to Vienna, which is, like, what everyone in Serbia does, to work illegally for a while. And he just missed it so much and he came back. So I think, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it will be as strong or if it will be the same, but I have the feeling that the attachment is big enough that something will continue, even if it changes shape somehow.
I was going to ask about the dragon hunting myself. I was just curious as to your first response to it, and then your take on sort of being around it as well over the years, and sort of being around it as the sort of dragon hunting is happening. I'm just curious what your relationship to it has been and is, maybe, as you've spent so much time there.
I mean, it gets very normalized very fast. You know, it's like for them, it's just a daily life thing, and it's part of their tradition. It's part of their identity, and they kind of know that it's a bit provocative for outsiders, but for them, it's just like a super normal thing. And when you're exposed to that, you get used to that very quickly as well, and you start thinking of it as a normal thing, and you stop questioning it. And for us, it was very important for us, like right from the beginning. We didn't want to make any. I get a lot of people asking me, like, do you believe in dragons? And I'm like, I'm Welsh, so. But so don't ask me that. But yeah, people ask me, do you believe in dragons? And it's like, well, it really doesn't matter what we believe. They believe it, and it's not really up to us to prove or disprove it or question it. You know, we were interested in this tradition as a tradition, and we always took it at face value in the way that they presented it to us. Yeah, but no, I never saw a dragon either. But I do have a little bit of Dragan gave me. He gave me like what they call like dragon grease. It's what they put in the incense that they put in the fires. So yeah, I have like wrapped up, and I always worried whenever I cross a border with it, like what the hell they're going to think it is. Yeah, I've got a little piece of a dragon, but I've never seen a whole one.
That's amazing. I was curious actually. I mean, that it might be a little bit simplistic as a sort of comparison, but you know, between the dragons and the mining. Like, were you ever struck by any sort of like cross-cultural similarities between where you were in Wales and anything like that as you were making the film? Or?
Yeah, I mean, but it's funny. But I mean, no, like one of the things that's funny about being in this region is that the UK doesn't exist for them, like as a concept, and they're kind of not really interested in it. Which was sort of weirdly refreshing. Like for them, the countries that exist are like former Yugoslavia. Romania, because it's just next door, and the language that they speak is basically Romanian. Like Gastarbeiter countries, like countries where you go to work, so like Germany, Austria, France, Switzerland. Like and Turkey because of the soap operas. Like these are the countries that exist. Like nothing else is really of interest. So they never really. It was quite refreshing for me. Like they never took any interest in where I was from. I tried explaining at some point, and they're like, "Yeah, whatever." But then I discovered at some point, like midway through filming, etymologically, so they're Vlach, and Welsh and Vlach actually come from the same root. So that, but yeah, at the Belgrade premiere, it was funny because I got asked this very like a question I wasn't massively impressed by, let's say, where they were like, as a foreigner, how did you feel being in this environment? And I don't know, I can't remember what I said, but I was cursing myself later that, you know, Alessandra, she's from the capital, she's from like a bourgeois intellectual family, and I really like, this is much more home for me than it was for her, actually, in a way. You know, for me, this wasn't that weird in a lot of ways, and I was like, oh, I should have said that.
You've said it now.
Yeah,
We've got it.
it's on record, finally.
Any other questions, maybe, before we bring things to a close? No? I'm going to end with another perhaps obvious ending question, which is what might we see next from you? What's in the pipeline? What's coming? If it's not too big a question.
I don't know. I mean, it's a classic situation of many ideas, no money. So I'm kind of throwing project proposals out into the wind and hoping that somebody throws some money back at me at some point. So let's see. Yeah, I think, I don't know. I mean, I would like to do something more in the region, but I kind of don't know what. So, yeah, we'll see. I kind of, in my work, I sort of have two main strands. One is like this Eastern Serbia strand with the short films that we made as well, and the other is like actually in the Czech Republic, where I was also living before, and that somehow led me down the path of being interested in syphilis. So most of my projects, so like half of the people who know me as the dragon girl, and half of them know me as the syphilis girl. And so yeah, I think like I'm gonna stay with syphilis for a while, I think, and see what happens with that.
What better way to end a Q&A? I don't know. I just don't think we could have done better than that, really. Zoe, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. Let's give Zoe a round of applause.